Listeners, welcome back to an episode of the Bitcoin Magazine podcast. I'm excited to bring you another great guest today, a good friend of mine, Nate from Voltage. Nate, thanks for joining us today.
Hey, Chris, glad to be here. How's it going?
Doing well, doing well. I'm excited to talk about Lightning. While I have a very minimal understanding of Lightning, I think that I like to consider you one of my Lightning buddies or Lightning experts. Whenever I have issues or questions or concerns, I always go to you. So, Nate, I'd love for you to just kind of describe the Lightning Network in its simplest form, how it works, and then maybe we can go into more details after that.
Yeah, no, that's always a fun question to try to answer because just like Bitcoin itself, you can have a very, very simple answer, but the rabbit hole goes very, very, very deep. But yeah, so for those that don't know, though, the Lightning Network is a way to transact in Bitcoin that doesn't directly utilize the limitations of the Bitcoin blockchain, mainly the blocks themselves, which are limited by data size. So it's really cool to be able to have a transactional layer on Bitcoin, such as the Lightning Network, to be able to have instant settlement when you're using Bitcoin as money. And there's also a bunch of other ways to use Lightning as well. But the way that the Lightning Network is sort of formed is just through a series of liquidity channels between nodes, which is just Lightning Network software, and how these liquidity channels just sort of ebb and flow in liquidity to facilitate the payments that's sort of transcended above the Bitcoin blockchain. However, everything is still tied to the Bitcoin blockchain, which is the final judge of the transactions that are done on the Lightning Network.
Yeah, no, I think that's a great breakdown, and I know many people have, tried to explain the Lightning Network as basically like, a bar tab. If you get, three drinks at a bar, you don't settle up till the end of the night. I know that other people have done it as like a web, like a spider web, basically. Like, let's just say you and I have a Lightning channel, and then you have a channel with your buddy Bob, but I want to pay Bob. I could pay you or pay Bob
Right.
through you, basically. So, you take a small fee or basically fractions of a cent or a Satoshi's to basically route that payment from myself to our buddy Bob if you have a channel open with him.
Right. Yeah. And so what we're talking about is actually participating in sort of the actual Lightning Network infrastructure by running a node, which does require, as you say, deploying Bitcoin as capital to these channels to create this network effect that is the backbone of the Lightning Network. But just like, I don't know, email, right? You don't need to run an email server to use email.
Mm-hmm.
Anyone can download an app and use the Lightning Network right away. We've got a whole new generation of really cool user friendly apps that have come out in the last couple of years that are really cool. So if you want to try the Lightning Network, you don't have to go learn Linux and do everything. You could do that, and I encourage that. But you don't have to manage channels and stuff if you don't want to.
Yeah, no, I think that kind of sets up perfectly to my next point. Like Bitcoin's a journey very much for everyone. You kind of learn what Bitcoin is. I know I even made the mistake early on in my Bitcoin journey buying it on Robinhood and then realizing I couldn't withdraw. So then I sold it on Robinhood and, made it in a way that I could buy it. And then you kind of learn, oh, there's downsides to KYC exchanges versus non KYC exchanges. So maybe if you can lay out the lay of the land, the difference between custodial Lightning and non custodial Lightning and what the trade offs are between the two, basically.
Oh, interesting. Okay, yeah. So there's a couple scenarios here, but generally what we're speaking of is the mobile app experience, a way that you can divide up and categorize the mobile Lightning Network app landscape is, as you said, custodial and non-custodial. And custodial is you're sending and receiving Lightning payments, and you see on the app that it tells you your balance and everything. However, those on a custodial app, those sats are being held on someone else's node, and that is risky. But people are like, hey, it's quick, it's easy, I could use it. I have $20 worth of Bitcoin on there. I don't care if I get rugged. That's logical. That makes sense. However, there is this sort of new generation of Lightning app that is coming out and on the horizon. I think that is non-custodial and doesn't drain your battery like crazy, like the first generation of Lightning non-custodial apps did. Apps such as Phoenix, Mutiny just came out, which is a browser-based one. So it's still there's still potential of risk on these. And then there's also Blockstream Green wallet is going to have a Lightning Network, non-custodial Lightning Network component added to their app soon too. So I think we're really seeing the drive from developers to bring the user experience of the Lightning Network, not having to manage channels and stuff, but still get the non-custodial, I control my keys features.
Yeah, no, I think that was very well explained. So you know, obviously there's trade-offs when you're like you said, when you're using a custodial Lightning application or app. There's issues where basically you can get rugged, where they're running the server and they can basically force close your channels or basically sweep your funds. Where non-custodial, you hold
I
it
mean, it's
on.
just, I mean, even not even a channel. It could just, it's just a database, and they
Yeah,
just type in zero, gone.
yeah, definitely. Where with non-custodial, obviously you're controlling it either through your own node or you know a lot of times, sometimes through their node. But Phoenix, they have a trust trade-off that's basically as you're opening the channel, you basically send it on chain, and they kind of open channels. And I guess there's a risk in between when sending the funds to when them opening the channel, basically that they can kind of sweep it until then, if that's right.
Yeah, that's true. So, but the Phoenix in particular, you're still running a light node client on your phone. So when so for Phoenix is a, as we're talking about, um, you can generate an invoice immediately on Phoenix. Like you say, $10 worth of Bitcoin. I pay that, and what's going to happen is they're going to open up a channel, and if you pay them on chain, they'll open up a channel. So it's like you're still getting channels because you are running a node on your phone, essentially. So that's like the non-custodial part of that. And Mutiny is the same way. It's just a web app based one. The way that they're implementing Greenlight into Blockstream Green, though, I haven't got a chance to play with it yet, but it's entering beta soon, and I'm actually really excited about that.
That's really cool. Yeah, I've never really tested out Blockstream Green. I've downloaded it and kind of opened it up and kind of seen the UX, the UI, but I've never really
Yeah.
tested with funds and stuff. So that's definitely something I want to do. I know also you and I were both at the Lightning Summit down at Bitcoin Park. It was a very I don't know about you. I had an awesome time down at the summit. It was great seeing so many awesome Bitcoiners. There was about 200 people there. There was also an announcement from Evan Kaludis of Zeus, basically saying that you know for the longest time he was kind of a node non-custodial implementation that a way that you can interact with your own node from your mobile wallet. But he's doing one of his announcements, or that was going into alpha or beta, was basically announcing that you could do exactly kind of like Phoenix, or not exactly, but you could basically have a non-custodial wallet on your phone through Zeus without needing to connect your own node. Obviously, there's trust trade-offs, there's privacy trade-offs. You're going to be using either his node or a node that they're connected to move funds, so you're kind of doxing your privacy there. But I think that opens up a good point. While the Lightning Summit was awesome, I really enjoyed it. It was cool hearing from the people like yourself and even a lot of the developers that were saying like Bitcoin, the Lightning Network has come a long way in its 5-6 year history, but there's still a lot of work to be done.
Yeah.
So, what were some of the trade offs? Obviously, I know Tony Giorgio of Mutiny Wallet was one of the first ones that comes to mind. Like, Bitcoin on the Lightning Network's privacy ish. Basically, his way of saying like you can send things pretty privately, but obviously receiving. There was a couple web browsers that I actually have up on my phone. Lightningdecoder.com as well as bolt11.org are two ones that like it just shows you what a generic invoice looks like, and you could actually break down what each piece of the invoice means. And like this is
Yeah.
doxing, the amount. This is doxing, your the signature. This is basically the payment secret. Like it shows, and I even saw this a couple months ago. Seth from Privacy, someone was like, "Yeah, just post a Lightning invoice from your phone or whatever." And basically, Seth was basically like, "Yep, I can kind of see your IP, I can see the amount, I can see this," and then people
Right.
were shocked. Like they were under the assumption that Lightning Network, like you're completely private, where that may not be true. So sorry for my long rant there, Nate, but I guess maybe if you can kind of break down
So
to our audience some of the drawbacks to Lightning, maybe from the privacy standpoint, or things that we need to improve or setbacks that it has right now.
yeah, so this invoice, so okay, yeah, there's a lot to talk about. Um, so when you say I request X satoshis, right, a big blob of letters and numbers are going to pop up, and it seems like it's completely random, whatever, but it's not. It's completely decodable. You know, the amounts, whatever. Anyone who has this Bolt 11 invoice, and Bolt 11 is just a protocol spec standard for the Lightning Network, um, can see the public key of the node that is requesting the payment. So if you are running a Lightning node and you want to receive payment from somebody who you probably don't want to know your pub key, which also gives them access to go to somewhere like amboss.space and look up your total capacity, look up all your peers, look up all this other stuff that isn't in the invoice. However, you just need the public key, and now you can go look up pretty much everything on it. Not everything though, thankfully, but pretty close. Maybe you don't want them to know that. So like, what's the solution? There's really not. I mean, there's ideas such as rendezvous routing, which is an old idea of trampoline, blinded paths. There's a lot of really cool talk around this challenge. A lot of folks will use actually mobile apps for privacy also. Wall of Satoshi is the biggest custodial Lightning Network app, but if you receive a payment on Wall of Satoshi, like, you're not doxing anything personally about you to whoever is paying you, and that is because it is not your node. So yeah, I'll stop there just for a second. Does that make sense?
No, yeah, that makes sense, and I think kind of your point that there's a lot of ways or improvements that they're trying to do, whether it's trampoline routing, whether it's that. I know Odell kind of had a cool way of doing things. So normally he runs multiple nodes, and kind of what he does
Yeah.
is he has a public facing node and then he has a privacy facing node. So for those listening, basically he is one that he'll receive payments to, and it kind of docks his identity. And then he's got lightning channels that bridge between the privacy facing node and the public facing node. So there's lightning channels between the two. And then
Right.
basically, he kind of routes payments. You pay the public node and you kind of can see all the information there. And then he routes it over to the private node. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I know Tony Giorgio is very good at like doxing or trying to figure out this, that he was able to basically, maybe I don't want to
Well, so if,
misspeak,
if
but
you're if you're
yeah.
advanced enough to run a node and stuff, you can, when you open a channel, you can choose not to announce that channel to the wider network. Back in the day, that was called a private channel. We're trying to use the term unannounced channel now because, as you mentioned, it's not really private. Private. The word private assumes a 100% guarantee. I don't know,
Yeah.
just like you would think, right? If it's private, it's private. If it's kind of private, it's not really private. So yeah, so you're not announcing it to the network. However, there's ways to sort of ping fake transactions throughout the Lightning Network, and like a sonar sort of, and depending on what happens, you could sort of slightly detect, oh, there could be an unannounced channel, between these two peers.
Yeah,
And
and that was kind of your point that like Tony kind of figured out, was able to basically do this with pinging and basically sending fraudulent payments or payments that don't go through to figure out like, oh,
and I
there's a
don't want to say ping because ping already has like a networking definition.
yeah,
In Lightning we call it probing,
yeah.
but I was just using that as sort of like a sonar analogy, though, kind of.
Yeah,
But
no,
yeah,
I like that. But basically, he was able to figure out that Odell had another node with non-public, unannounced
yeah,
channels with another node. He was basically not able to figure out exactly the liquidity, but the about liquidity between this unannounced
right.
channel and the public-facing node that Odell had.
So yeah, and another solution that is being worked on is Bolt 12, which is, the hope is that someday that will transcend Bolt 11 and bring with it all these benefits and stuff. But I guess to boil it all down, this specific topic, it's like everyone, all the developers I know are aware of the issues, and they are working very, very hard to implement the correct changes, especially at the spec level. You don't want to mess up the spec level because that is where everything else is built on. So the Lightning Network is really, really important to get right. And so that's why there is a lot of debate and stuff. And sometimes a little bit of a slow ramp up to these changes. But I think over the last couple of years we've seen progress, and I think that's going to keep happening. So just to let everyone know, I think it's going to get better. This isn't like set in stone that your receiver is always going to be like you're always going to be able to tell what the pub key of the receiver is. Another actually cool little, just real quick, is there are and I guess we could talk about this later. So I work at Voltage, and we have a product that's brand new where you basically, if you don't want whoever is paying you to know what your node is, you could give us the invoice, and then we'll give an invoice that we generate to whoever you're, back to you, and then you could give that to whoever's paying you. So we can do this non-custodial sort of swap thing, and it's really part of our liquidity service that we have. But if you don't need a channel, we're not going to open up a channel to you. We'll just facilitate the sort of the payment thing. So the person that you're giving the invoice to thinks that they're paying Voltage, or if they decode it, well, they think that they're paying you, but the invoice you give them decodes to Voltage instead of decoding to your actual node. So there's like little workarounds right now. It's not perfect, but hopefully the actual spec changes will come soon.
I have not used this feature, so I need to. So then people are going to think I have the beefiest voltage node they've ever seen until they use Amboss and figure out that basically it's not me. But that is very, very cool. Well, so I guess that this kind of leads into my next thing. Obviously, I think you're pretty bullish on Lightning. I'm pretty bullish on Lightning as well. Obviously, I think there's work to be done, and it's not, it's not a finished product. It's something that's still being built out. But I'm pretty happy with where it is. We're hovering around 4,500 or 4,600 Bitcoin in Lightning network capacity at this moment. I know it's kind of down a little bit. We definitely broke 5K a few months ago.
Mhm.
So I guess maybe the first question was, I know that you just had a video recently. I think it was, correct me if I'm wrong, I don't know if it was Bitfinex that was basically pulling
Yeah.
down liquidity. And this is something that you're like, this isn't a bad thing. This doesn't mean that they're bearish on Lightning. But maybe can you give a high level overview of why someone might close channels or open channels? Obviously, people
Yep.
open channels to pay people, but they had one of the larger nodes on the Lightning Network, and they were closing channels, and it was kind of like a mass closure at least a few days ago, and they did one earlier in either June or July as well. So maybe if you could break it down, kind of describe what it was and what you're seeing, basically.
Yeah, yeah. So um, there has been some pretty large Lightning nodes that have been closing channels recently, and if you don't have a decent grasp of the Lightning network, that might seem pretty scary, right? Pulling down channels, that means less pads on the network. That means more likely your payments are going to fail, et cetera, et cetera. However, folks like Bitfinex who have channels multiple Bitcoin in size to the same peer multiple times, like I don't know, they had like 8 channels to bit refill with 2 Bitcoin per channel. Um, and although we cannot see we can see the total size of that channel, but we can't see the movement of the funds. That's hidden away from the outside, right? But you could still sort of think, maybe they were a little bit too. When the Bitfinex node came out, that was years ago. It was like brand new. Lightning was brand new. They're probably like, cool, let's go, go, go. Let's open up a bunch of big channels and everything. And then maybe over time, it's just kind of like either that liquidity got used up or the channels just maybe they're like, maybe we need 2 channels instead of 10 channels with this peer. um, that's perfectly okay. That's not messing with the network at all. It's not messing with routing at all. If the amount of channels doesn't necessarily matter, it's the amount of channels that are being used efficiently. So, like, if I open up 1,000 channels to you, Chris, but you and I both don't have any other channels to the wider network, are we helping the network? No, right? But the amount of channels go up, so that's good for Lightning. Not necessarily. And I know that's kind of an extreme example and it doesn't really cover, but all I'm trying to say is um, the amount of channels are important, but the amount of channels that are between peers that are actually facilitating payments are more important than just raw channels and stuff. And the thing about the Lightning Network is we don't know what the transactions per day are. We don't know a lot of information about it. So we're using what metrics we do have to sort of deduce how Lightning is doing. And I think that if you're running a node and you have a channel, no matter what the size is, and you're like, I've had this channel for a year, it hasn't really been routing for me, I haven't really been using it, why do I even have it open at this point? Like, I should, we could redeploy it somewhere else. or just close it down temporarily and whatever. So I and like I said in that video you mentioned, it's just my opinion. We have no idea really, but I still think that, I mean, it's just my opinion of their reasoning. However, I think that those that understand the Lightning Network don't think it's that big of a deal. It's a lot like when when sort of maybe hash rate goes down a little bit. It's like, yeah, that stinks, but Bitcoin still goes. Um, yeah. So yeah, I don't want to get too crazy technical on that, but it's okay. It's
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah, so then I guess this leads me to my next question. I was going to bring up that it kind of seems to be there's like there's a few ways that the Lightning Network's building out. And to your point, it's kind of like one of those things that like Bitcoin will propagate and live on regardless of how this pans out. But I'd love to get your ideas on it. So obviously, we have larger liquidity providers like Async, like Cash
Yeah.
App, like Strike, like River. Those are the ones that come to mind with like large Lightning liquidity. I'm sure Voltage is up there as well. But to your point, I've seen recently with Cash App, and I was kind of doing some just high level heuristics. Like they basically only open channels with they put restrictions on who can open channels with them, but a lot of times they're only approving other like large Lightning liquidity providers. And my
Mm.
point is basically it seems that they're only approving like KYC centralized exchanges. I couldn't just me as an individual couldn't just open up a Lightning liquidity between me and Cash App or something like that. Whereas like if you and I open a channel and then like we open it up other channels to other peers in the Bitcoin community, like we can make a more robust, resilient. I guess that's the best way to describe it.
Yeah.
Resilient, non KYC, non-state state approved Lightning Network. I guess that's the way I'm trying to get at. So I guess what are your thoughts on this breakdown of like the larger
And
exchanges kind of only dealing with larger exchanges versus you and
I think
I?
there's two things there. One is, all right, I'm Cash App right now, and I want to facilitate Lightning. So what am I just going to allow anyone on the network to open up any size channel they want to my node? I could do that. But then option two is, and I'm not a lawyer or whatever, but there could be like, their lawyers could be like, hey, listen, you can open up channels to if they meet this criteria, but who they open up channels to is fine, whoever, right? So like my personal private node, I could still pay a Cash App invoice from my private node. So it's getting there from somewhere. So somewhere in that path is a node that Cash App approved to have a channel with them, but also they have channels to the wider network in some way. So I think it's just like this 1 degree of separation thing, maybe that they're doing. And honestly, that is kind of okay. And honestly, if you're trying to optimize running a Lightning node, it might behoove you to try to create a path between, or create a channel that with a node that has a channel with a node that has a channel with Cash App or something, right? So you can help sort of funnel that liquidity into Cash App, even though Cash App itself doesn't allow just anybody to open up channels with them. There's still a couple hops down that might not be the case anymore. So it's it is what it is, I guess. But that's kind of how I would think about it.
Yeah, no, I think that's a really good explanation. And I think it was even you when I was first, kind of dabbling in Lightning back in 2020, 2021. I was trying to, at first you're testing, you're like, oh, like maybe I'll open like 10 channels of like 100K sats. And I think it was either you or someone else that was saying just on Twitter, like, you're better off having larger channels for Lightning. And the issue that you can kind of see more recently when fees start to run away, and then there was some issues with LND. This is not a critique of them that like channels were accidentally getting forced closed by accident, or they were getting closed because of the runaway fees, and then basically like you and the peer that you're with are like disagreeing what the channel is, and then there was a really high fee into high fee environment in order to close the channel. So you can kind of run into issues where if you don't have larger, beefier Lightning Network channels, you can get
Yeah.
into a lot of fees and stuff like that.
And that's a good point. The large is relative, and when folks are trying to figure out what size of channel they should open up with, the value comes from whatever their on-chain payment to open is.
Yeah.
For example, if I plan on buying an Amazon gift card every week for 10 weeks, should I open a $100 channel every week, or should I open up a $1,000 worth channel once right now and get all that value sort of in that first on-chain transaction? That's something that folks will have to think about, because, as like you said, a high fee environment, you're going to reach a point where, if you're, I mean, you know what I'm saying? Like, if why would I spend $20 on chain to open up a $20 channel? It's
Yeah.
just, so it's really sort of like, think, and then think about how long you're going to want to have the channel in an ideal situation. So it really just comes down to the value of on chain, and that's why, when we had one sat per vbyte for a long time, we were just opening up channels left, right, center. Who cares? It's not a big deal. But that's slowly beginning to sort of change, I think, and people are getting a little bit more picky about it. And one of the cool things about running a Lightning node is you can set it to automatically reject when other people try to open up a channel that is below a threshold that you define. Like, I can say I only want channels of 5 million or higher, and if you try to open up with me, it'll tell you can't do it. I think we'll see more of that as the years, right, go on, because I personally think that we may not clear the mempool someday.
Yeah,
So
no, I am
I'm
definitely
I'm on that
team.
side of the fence.
Yeah, I'm definitely on team. We may not clear the mempool. I don't think it's now, but I mean, it
Right.
remains to be seen. Like, I do think we'll eventually clear, but to your point, I think we will be at a point where it will never clear, and you'll have to use things either like replaced by fee in order to get things like, whether it's a channel or a transaction through that needs more immediate versus one that you can just leave in there for a longer time. I guess I want to hit one more thing before we go into kind of like, I think that we were talking at the Lightning Summit once again. Very awesome. Recommend everyone go to Bitcoin Park to check it out in Nashville. But one of the things that we saw recently, when obviously the fees were ramping up, we saw issues with LND closing channels. And I heard mixed things. This is just hearsay, but I heard mixed things
Yeah.
about people saying that, they were kind of using this private public key pairing of like they own both lightning channels, and then there was issues where nodes were closing lightning channels when they didn't want to, or I guess it was a
Yeah.
bug in LND that was causing this. Maybe can you speak to this about the issue with forced closures by accident and stuff like that?
Yeah, so I'm not, I'm not a spec dev or whatever. So, like, pretty much what I hear is just what I hear also. But just the way that the safety of channels were designed, right? If you've got payments that aren't going through or whatever, or you disagree with your peers about the state of the channel, there are security mechanisms built into the Lightning Network to shut that channel down in order to prevent any sort of malicious activity. Even if malicious activity isn't happening, it's just a security mechanism. And when your channels are small in a super high fee rate environment and the reserves are changing, your node or your channel could have what's called stuck HTLCs, and it could trigger these things. But shortly after the that whole few weeks of craziness, Lightning Labs decided to lax that just a smidge, which I think has helped a little bit. So this is specifically about LND I'm talking about right now. But I know that they released a version update to address those issues. I'm not sure exactly what they changed on that, but they did release a version update pretty quickly after that to sort of help mitigate those sort of spontaneous force closures, which nobody wants to deal with
Yeah, and
for good
exactly, and
reason.
yeah, and it was good reason too. Like, I definitely see from their side of things, like, the worst thing would be is if you were kind of draining liquidity from my node, and then you're able to, basically steal money from me, and then my node force closes the channel to prevent this from happening, or from preventing it from getting worse, basically. So it is very cool that they
Yeah.
relaxed that. So when we were talking at the Lightning Summit, I think this is very cool. You were kind of saying, like, obviously you want to, Bitcoiners, you want to have a low time preference, you want to build things for the future, you want to have something that lasts a long time. I'd love to give your take of basically saying take 10% of your Bitcoin stack and then splitting that into 10 and kind of opening up lightning channels. Maybe this is self
Yeah, so
promotion or something.
this is my controversial hot take or whatever, but and this kind of goes back to preventing centralization or whatever. It's like, we are many, right? We are the node runners, and it's my opinion that if you're a Bitcoiner, you're comfortable holding your own keys. You might run a node. You might use something like Sparrow connected to your own node to validate your own funds and stuff. Um, the rabbit hole doesn't stop there. And I think Lightning is a really good next step to take in the Bitcoin journey. There there is a real need for more Bitcoiners to run Lightning nodes and be incentivized to do that. So my idea is, um, I feel like when people look into the Lightning Network, they start getting sort of like, oh no, this is like a lot, right? How to do circular rebalancing and your channels and blah 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 blah. And I believe in a more simpler approach where you just open channels to nodes that are decent, and then don't worry about doing atomic swaps and buying channels. Don't worry about inbound, and just slowly sort of um, spend it, spend and replace. Because one of the really cool things about running a Lightning node is every time you spend out of it, you get inbound liquidity as in, I would call it a kickback in a lot of ways, because having inbound liquidity is actually very valuable. And so, you spend a little bit until you need another channel, then open another channel. Spend a little bit, buy some groceries, whatever, open another channel. Don't worry about rebalancing and all that stuff. It's not a big deal. But over time, you might start seeing, oh, I'm routing payments, and oh, I could do all this stuff, and then before you know it, you're running Lightning Node Connect custodial wallets for your friends and family and getting them onboarded with stuff, which is actually really really fun. Um, and I just think that it's only as complex as you want it to be. You don't need to sit there and monitor it and min max it and do all this stuff. Just run it, connect it to Zeus. When you're at Bitcoin Park, buy a bottle of water with your Zeus, get inbound liquidity as like a cool little kickback for spending. And then before you know it, you might have a ton of inbound liquidity, depending on how much you're spending and over time. And now, instead of just opening up a channel, go to Amboss Magma, open a channel, and get paid to do it. Now people are going to pay you to open up a channel with them. You can still spend. So you get this really cool sort of income over time, and you don't have to brute force it. It's just sort of over time.
Yeah, and I think that's a great point. I mean, I think it's very cool, like saying it's like a kickback or almost like a rebate. Like, yeah, you're spending out. Yes, you're spending sats, but to your point, like spend and replace. But then you're also getting a valuable Lightning Network node, and you can basically, like you said, use Amboss or other things to sell Lightning liquidity to people, and that'll become valuable in the future. At least we perceive as the mempool fills up over time, and as it gets more and more expensive to do things on the base chain, it pushes
Yeah.
people into higher layers.
Yep.
You know,
And like you said, though, I mean, I use this idea. It's like 10%. Well, I don't know, right? I just, obviously you don't want to throw your whole stack into Lightning and go crazy, right? But like I said, if just sort of calculate like what kind of like how much money do you spend at Walmart every month or whatever, and just open up a channel of that size at the beginning of the month, and then buy a Walmart gift card from the Bitcoin company or Bitrefill or something, and then you got inbound liquidity. And like I said, over time, then you go to Magma, you sell it, 3% APR on average over there right now, which is pretty cool. You're not going to get rich or whatever, but it's better to get paid to open up a channel than it is to just open a channel, I think.
no, yeah, I completely agree. Okay, so speaking of like pushing into other layer twos, I'd be remiss to not bring up Arc. I know that
Ah,
everyone was, the podcast circuit, everyone was having a Barack on. I think Barack is a very talented developer. I'm not taking anything away from him,
Brock's
but
awesome.
yeah, no,
Yeah.
Barack is awesome. I guess many people are disappointed that he's going and making Arc. I mean, it's Bitcoin, it's you're free and open source, you're able to do whatever you want. But people like I saw a couple Lightning developers basically saying like, Lightning is so far along and it's here and it's working and it's now. Where Arc, I mean, I know he really released a white paper for it, but like there's no specs for it to my knowledge, and it's not operational yet. So it's very cool and futuristic,
Mhm.
but like it's kind of like always 2 weeks TM. But like this, a lot of people project it's going to be 2 to 3 years before Arc's even really has like a even like an alpha or a beta running. So maybe what are your thoughts on Arc or competing layer
Yeah, so I
twos?
mean, I'm not. I mean, I'm in the Arc Telegram. I skim it every now and then. I'm not very active or active at all, really. I think that the best idea is going to win. I think that those who think Arc is going to come out soon for even testing is gonna be wrong. I don't know. And the but the like you said, the Light Network works now. Light Network has very specific defined issues. However, I think probably all of the big issues, some of which we talked about here today, there are solutions in the pipeline for. And if the Light Network is the layer two to beat, if Arc is to compete with the Lightning Network or even integrate with the Lightning Network, as some Arc folks have said that, hey, the Lightning Network can actually work with Arc also. Cool. Um, but um, but yeah, at the end of the day, though, if we're looking to run a Lightning node and then you heard about Arc and you're like, you know what, I'm gonna wait for Arc. I think that's a terrible decision. I think participate in Lightning until something is actually better. I don't think playing a wait and see is a good idea. And that's just me. So everyone could do whatever they want to do. I just don't want people 3, 4, 5 years to now to be like, gee, I really wish I started that Lightning node back in
Yeah.
the day.
And I
Um,
think Nate, I think this is kind of like a problem, not just with Bitcoiners, but even no coiners. I see like perfect being the enemy of good. Like, is it better to buy non KYC Sats, which you run on Sparrow on your own node and all of this? Absolutely. But versus like, oh, I didn't buy Bitcoin because I got scared because I don't know what was going to happen. And, oh, I'm waiting for it to go cheaper. It's like, no, like you're better off getting in at a higher price, messing around with a little bit amount, maybe using a KYC exchange. Not that I advocate for that, but you're better at least getting your feet wet or like learning about it first, and then kind of improving or increasing your setup. Yes, would I love everyone to dive in headfirst into non KYC Sats that they open up Lightning channels with while running their own node, over Tor? Like, yes, that's the perfect case scenario. But
and the thing is too, and this doesn't, I mean, this kind of goes without saying, but I'm going to say it anyway, is that Bitcoiners that are running their own node connected to Sparrow, they have their cold cards and stuff. They're in this for the future. They've got the low time preference. They're saving this right. They're educating themselves, and I think that the Lightning is sort of going down that we were trying to remap, re re like change the path of humanity, right, out of this centralized insane
fiat world,
trajectory,
yeah,
fiat world that we've been on, into something that we would want our kids and grandkids to live in. We might not see the future that we're trying to build right now, but our grandkids will tell their grandkids that, hey, you know grandpa Chris was a part of that back in the day. And I think that I just, I don't really have a hero complex or whatever, but it's like we all need to play our part a little bit, and we all need to just keep learning and keep working and keep educating and keep encouraging, keep teaching, and just keep growing as people that want to live in a better world.
yeah, I couldn't agree more. And I guess I'm gonna do two more questions as we wrap up
Yeah,
here,
let's
Nate.
go.
This has been a great conversation. Honestly, I could go for hours, but I don't want to bore the audience.
Oh,
So
we have off,
speaking
off the record, but yeah, go ahead.
no, but like, so I'd be remiss to say if I didn't bring up splicing. So obviously, Dusty Damon's been
Oh,
working on this for at least 2 years. We were talking about building out the future, low time preference. Dusty obviously did the first splice. I believe it was at Bitcoin 2022 on the open source stage. He
mhm.
actually brought up at B23, was like, yeah, like I think the last splice was, or the first splice was in February or March. They're like, no, it was in April. You actually had a tweet, and they pulled up the tweet from the conference of like, just did my
Yeah.
first splice on the open source stage. But Obviously, we just saw Async, or the ones that run Phoenix Wallet, just integrate splicing. Obviously, it's in a beta right now. Obviously, Dusty has a grant from Blockstream, and I think he also works at Blockstream.
Mhm.
So he's trying to integrate it into core Lightning. So, what are your thoughts on splicing? If you can give a high level overview for the audience of
Yeah.
what splicing
So
is, and then what you see it improving with the Lightning Network, that'd be great.
splicing's amazing, and I could go on and on for a long time. But I'll for those that don't know, so okay, so if I open up a channel with you, Chris, for 5 million sats today, we cannot change that 5 million sats. You can't add another million to it. You can't take another million out of it. Splicing changes the game on that, where now I can open up a channel with you, spend it all through the network, and instead of being like, oh, I really liked having outbound liquidity with Chris, I need to open up another channel with Chris. Instead, now I could just plug in more Bitcoin into that existing channel. That's the sort of high level idea of it. And then you could also splice out of it. So if I receive a bunch and I'm like, okay, well, I want to take some of that back on chain, I can now remove it from the channel without having to close the channel down. I could just pull it out, the capacity shrinks back down to whatever the difference is, and the channel still exists. But it goes even further than this, because you can also splice in or splice out multiple channels simultaneously. You could pull from one channel, put into another channel, really make your node more efficient without so much on-chain footprint. And you can also create splice transactions with other node runners to further amplify this effect, thus not having to spend even more on-chain fees. So it has on-chain fee footprint improvements, it has privacy improvements, and it has Lightning Network efficiency improvements. It is the most exciting thing about Lightning right now, I think. And some people be like, "Oh no, there's taproot assets and there's all this other stuff." And yeah, there's a lot of other stuff, right? But my big focus is I want the foundational Lightning Network to be extremely efficient with as much of a minimal on-chain footprint as possible, and splicing is really really cool. So
Yeah. No,
that's
I
I'm
think you did a
super
great.
stoked about it.
I think you did a great job with it too. And using that same 5 million sat example, this is something that I'm not a developer, you're not a developer. So I'll just speak for myself though, that like when, let's say we have a 5 million sat channel between the two of us, and you want to remove a million sats out, like, there's more liquidity on your side. You want to remove a million sats out. In the process of doing that, the 4 million sats that is now the new balance doesn't close or run off state, meaning that like it's not like in the process of when you're doing this during the splice that like we can no longer transact. We can still transact those 4 million sats as long as our nodes agree and there's not an issue. But
Right.
it's like one of those things that it's instantaneous. Like there's no locking mechanism, or there is briefly like for a second or two when you're
Mhm.
broadcasting the splice. But after that splice is communicated and it rebalances the channel down or even up, like you can use the liquidity between us still, which I find fascinating. It's like I'm sure
Yeah.
you could talk about this with liquidity providers. Like this allows for just-in-time liquidity. This allows for not fucking
Oh
with
yeah.
states of channels that they currently have. And then maybe adding one more thing. This is kind of a concept that was added or is conceptualized. I don't think it's quite there yet, but splice joins. So meaning that like you're doing a coin join into opening a channel. So you're coin joining your coins, or basically it's a way of doing how do I describe it? Coin join is a way of a
Yeah.
collaborative transaction to hide your privacy, and in the process of doing that, you can
Help
use
your privacy.
to help your privacy. On the output, you can use the output to open up a Lightning channel. So it's basically a more private
Right.
way of opening a channel, which
And
is
you can
I
take
think
it to the
really awesome.
next level. And if it's a taproot open, then you don't even know it's a channel open anymore. Where
Yeah,
right now, it's a channel open. But
I think there's
yeah,
still a little bit of developments to go there because
yeah,
but I think that is something that like a lot of people are kind of forecasting or seeing the future. So I think that's
yeah.
very very cool. The whole
And
splice
and
joins
and
with the
yeah, I
Lightning.
mean, I think I mean, just to rub off that a little bit, besides the Bolt 11 thing, as we were talking about in the beginning, um, if you pull Sats, and this is just a little tip or trick, I guess, real quick. If you pull Sats straight from KYC Exchange and open up a channel with it on your own node, that exchange knows what your Lightning node is. So it's really, really important to do something like CoinJoin. I'm a big fan of Whirlpool. And
Yeah, I'm
then
a Whirlpool
if
guy
you
as
and
well.
then take those sats and open up channels after that. Just don't combine them with anything touching KYC sats. So this is something that I think maybe before starting a Lightning node, learn about coin control a little bit, learn how that stuff works. It's a very important thing to know.
Yeah, no, definitely. I completely agree. Nate, it's been a great, 45 minutes here. The last question I want to ask you is, obviously you work at Voltage. Can you tell people some of the things that you guys do at Voltage? I know you guys are an awesome company in my opinion, and just
Yeah,
some of the services and features that you guys offer at Voltage that people might want to hear and use with their Lightning node experience that they're doing right now.
yeah. So Voltage is, I pretty sure now, the longest running and largest Lightning node provider out there. We host nodes for individuals in a cloud environment, so you don't need to run your node on your own infrastructure. One thing about running a Lightning node is you do need to be online for your node to work. So this can be challenging in a lot of parts of the world, or if you are running a major business with the Lightning infrastructure as a major component, you can't really afford for your Lightning nodes to go offline. So that's sort of the major niche that Voltage is filling. However, there's tons of other stuff that we have, including Nostr toolkits. We have a really cool analytics tool, which is sort of like a co-pilot dashboard for your node to help give you sort of insights over time. So as a business or an enterprise, you can easily optimize your node, as well as a bunch of other really cool content, YouTube channel, that sort of thing. And another thing is we are really focused on supporting the Bitcoin ecosystem. We have no interest in having sort of like a walled garden. We are very open. A lot of our services you can actually plug your own node into. You don't need to run a node Voltage to use a lot of Voltage products. And this is because we're all Bitcoiners at Voltage, and we want to provide as much service as possible to those out there. So check us out, Voltage.Cloud. It's You'll see us around for sure.
Definitely. Love everything you do. Nate, if you want to plug your Twitter handle or your Nostr NIP5 identifier or whatever for people to find you
Yeah.
or reach out to you, well, how could they do
Yeah,
that?
so I'm not really on Twitter as much anymore. I'll put on my hat.
Love it.
But I still check my DMs on Twitter, so it's beef or bacon one on Twitter. And then Nostr, you could find me at nodeaddict@vlt.ge.
All right. Thank you so much, Nate. It's always a pleasure talking with you. I always appreciate your insights on Lightning and your breakdown of the current state of the Lightning Network. So thanks so much. Uh, Everyone, thank you for listening to the podcast. It is a pleasure. We'll catch you on the next one. Peace.